You see old junk. I see the start of something beautiful. Today on Mod House DIY, we're reimagining garden borders and fence decor using scrap. Not for the sake of style, but for soul. This video has timestamps. Skip to what you need, and don't hesitate to drop a comment if something sparks your curiosity. Disclaimer, these are not instructions. They're ideas, raw and imperfect. Use what you have. Make it your own. And if this video reaches you, know this. Behind the screen is a small family trying to build something honest. Every like, every comment, every subscribe, it matters. You're not just helping a channel grow. You're helping a dream survive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing us. Sometimes the beauty of a garden doesn't begin with the flowers. It starts at the edge, where form meets function, and forgotten things find new meaning. In this quiet corner of a suburban yard, under the gaze of summer sun, bicycle rims once destined for landfill now stand with grace. Lined like sentinels, their spokes catching dandelion fluff and morning light. They define the boundary not just of a flower bed, but of imagination itself. In the first garden, rims are pressed into the soil in a gentle arc, each one slightly imperfect, each one proud. Between them, dandelions stretch tall, while pink and violet blooms reach up behind. What once carried motion now holds stillness, and strangely, it holds it well. You don't need perfect symmetry. You don't need to weld. A simple act, burying the rim halfway, angling it just right, is all it takes to transform these mechanical circles into sculptural dividers. That's the secret charm. It feels both spontaneous and intentional. You look at it and think, I could do that. And you really could. Further along in the second space, a passage emerges. Here, the rims form twin rows like a pathway to another world. Raised beds filled with squash and climbing beans flank the gravel path, and each rim stands like an archway in a procession. There's rhythm in the spacing, almost musical. And for a moment, a narrow garden feels like a grand corridor, one guided not by bricks or concrete, but by discarded wheels made dignified. And then there's a third, simpler, smaller, but no less poetic. The rims are aged, some of the soft rust of years, others clean and silver like they've just been set free from a frame. They hold a line between the gravel path and a bed of tiny white wildflowers, creating a border that feels more like a brushstroke than a fence. It doesn't shout for attention. It simply works. Honest, grounding, quietly artistic. There's something profoundly inspiring in all of this. In a world where garden borders are often store-bought, sterile, and soulless, this idea asks you to pause, to look at the pile of bike parts in your garage not as trash, but as texture, as structure, as story. If you try this yourself, remember, the charm lies in leaving things a little raw. Let the rust show, let the rims wobble, allow the imperfections to become part of the rhythm. And when the flowers begin to bloom behind them, when bees buzz lazily through the spokes, you'll see what you really created. Not just a border, but a frame, a way of saying, this is where the wild things live. There's something beautifully honest about a fence that doesn't pretend to be perfect. A fence made not from catalogs, but from memory and muscle. Rusted rods, repurposed wire mesh, a few leftover bicycle parts. It might sound like the inventory of a junkyard, but in a quiet backyard, it becomes the spine of something living. In the first garden, narrow and tucked beside a house, The fence is built from scraps of steel piping and salvaged wire netting. Nothing lines up with machine precision, and yet everything fits. It bends a little. It leans a little. And that's what makes it human. Pea vines and runner beans cling to the roughness, winding upward like they found something trustworthy. A boundary, yes, but also a ladder toward light. This is where real gardens thrive. In spaces people often overlook. In passageways beside houses. In slim plots along fences. All it takes is one idea, like turning an old pipe into a post or a rusted wire mesh into a trellis. And suddenly, you've gained vertical room in a horizontal world. The second image invites us into a more formal entrance. A wire gate made from recycled fencing panels stands between two raised beds filled with towering sunflowers. The metal is oxidized, time-worn, almost brittle in places. But it holds. And that's the lesson. Beauty isn't the absence of age, it's the record of it. The structure might creak slightly when open, but behind it lies a garden that feels like sunlight bottled into green. What's most touching is how intentional it all feels without ever feeling fancy. This isn't a showpiece. It's a working garden. And the fence? It's not there to boast. It's there to serve, to frame, to quietly protect the things growing within. And then, a softer moment. A corner garden, with herbs nestled into raised beds and framed by a grid of chicken wire stretched between bike rims and salvage rods. Basil, rosemary, lavender, they grow with purpose. The fence around them is handmade, surely improvised, but anchored. It reminds us that restraint can be beautiful, that even a simple wire can feel elegant when strung with care. If you're thinking of doing this yourself, know this, it doesn't take much. Just start with what you have. Find the rusted rods behind the shed. Take the wire from an old gate. Tie it tight. Let the fence be rough. Plants don't mind. In fact, they seem to love it more. And when the wind blows to the vines, brushing the steel with the softest music, you'll know you've created something far better than store-bought. You've built a frame not just for your garden, but for a quiet kind of pride. Not every garden needs to be soft to feel calm. Sometimes, peace is found in something strong, in weight, in rust, in bolts that refuse to be polished. On this small patio, beneath soft hanging lights and surrounded by the gentlest daisies, something industrial rises with quiet confidence, a path paved in steel. Metal plates, once discarded and forgotten, now rest like ancient tiles between pebble gravel. Each one carries a fingerprint of time, dents, oxidation, scars. But nothing about them feels cold. Quite the opposite. They ground the space. They steady the eye. They tell you, this path leads somewhere honest. Lined with bolts carefully arranged like garden jewels, the walkway becomes more than functional. It becomes ceremonial. And with pots of white daisies and purple salvia standing like floral guardians, even the hardest materials begin to soften under bloom and light. Then, in a tucked corner, another scene unfolds, simple yet magnetic. A vertical sculpture of square metal plates, bolted and rusted into a rhythmic patchwork, leans against a plain cream wall. There is no pattern, and yet it feels composed, like music without melody but with perfect tempo. Around it, succulents sit in silence, their muted greens and purples echoing the earth tones of the oxidized steel. The light bulbs strung overhead are unlit, but somehow the piece already glows. This is what happens when you let the material lead the story. In the third setting, we find a surprising sun. Mounted on an old wooden fence, gears and discs once meant for machines are reborn as a radiant sculpture. Sharp and circular, silver and bold. It gleams not with polish, but with pride. And beside it, a handmade bench waits beneath vines, offering a place to sit and wonder who saw beauty in these parts first. That's the spirit of reuse, of upcycling. It's not about hiding the past life of a thing. It's about honoring it, letting it whisper into a new purpose. A bolt becomes a jewel. A steel plate becomes a canvas. And in a garden that blends softness with steel, your eyes rest not only on color, but on story. So if you've got old plates, bolts, or discarded parts lying around, don't rush to the trash bin. Instead, place them in the light. Frame them with flowers, and watch how rust begins to shine. Some gardens sing, others hum low and steady, like an old fan that once turned air into comfort, now retired and standing still in bloom. In this garden, what no longer spins still is presence. The matte black frame of broken fan, once destined for trash, has found new life as a quiet sculpture among marigolds and cosmos. The blades are long gone, but the circle remains, steady, symbolic, and almost spiritual. Fixed to a wooden post, it doesn't demand attention, but once you notice it, it anchors the whole space. A totem, a memory, a marker of how nothing really dies when imagination is present. Just a few steps away, another form of rebirth takes place. A stack of bricks and breeze blocks create a pedestal, humble but solid. On it, a disassembled fan cage cradles a cluster of succulents, now growing where air once flowed. Ivy gently spills over the edges. Moss makes a soft bed between bricks. There's a sacred quiet to this corner, the kind that only happens when something once mechanical becomes gently overgrown. This is what happens when you don't rush to tidy every edge, when you let nature stitch itself into design. And beyond, in a wilder section of the garden, a tower rises. 3 fan frames of different sizes, silvered, weathered, circular, are stacked into a vertical sculpture. They stand among wildflowers, blending in like a natural artifact. It doesn't try to be perfect. In fact, its oddness is what makes it beautiful. Like a forgotten machine left in a field, only it wasn't forgotten. Someone saw it, stopped, and placed it exactly where it belongs. That's the heart of this idea. You're not building with perfection. You're building with care. You're giving shape to memories. And in return, they shape the way your garden feels. These fan frames, no longer whirring or humming, now catch sunlight. They frame flowers. They become part of a quiet choreography with wind and vine. So before you throw that broken fan away, ask yourself, could it still hold something? A plant? A moment? A gaze? Because in a slow garden, even rust can become a form of reverence. And what no longer spins might still make your world move. In every old door, there is a story, not just of hands that opened it or of rooms that once closed off, but of possibilities waiting beyond the hinge. And in the heart of this garden, one such door has found its next purpose. No longer vertical, no longer separating indoors from out. It now lies flat, supported by blocks of concrete and filled with life. From its sunken panels, lettuces unfurl their green ruffles, and radishes peek through the soil with bright, round pride. The craftsmanship of the past cradles the nourishment of the present. It's a raised bed made not from lumber or kits, but from memory and imagination. What makes it special is how simple it truly is. No expensive tools, no complex joinery, just a door laid low, its inner frames cut open and filled with soil. It becomes a grid of growth, elegant, orderly, and tactile. The old brass handle still gleams faintly in the sunlight, a quiet nod to what it used to be. Around it, terracotta pots rest gently, like neighbors watching something beautiful take root. And then we shift. Another door, this time upright, leaning calmly against a weather fence. It's whitewashed, its paint chipped with age, its surface soft from sun and rain. But now it blooms. Small metal pails and tin cans dangle from its doorknobs and hooks, each one bursting with color. Petunias, pansies, daisies, whatever you can grow in a pot, you can hang on a door. It's vertical gardening with heart, and it's perfect for tiny spaces, narrow patios, or even balconies. It invites the eye upward. It makes walls less boring. It makes a fence feel like a frame. And when paired with a watering can, a wooden chair, and the flickering shadow vines, the whole corner becomes a vignette. Part garden, part gallery. Finally, there's the simplest and perhaps the most moving version, a reclaimed door against a fence, dressed in jars and cans, each one holding herbs that scent the air, thyme, oregano, mint. Their green spills over glass like untrimmed memories. The door has no hinges now, no lock. It stands open to the world. And in doing so, it becomes more than what it was. That is the soul of garden reuse. It's not just about saving money or avoiding waste. It's about choosing to see value in what others pass by. It's about asking, what can this become? And listening to the answer that soil and sunlight whisper back. Because sometimes the door to your dream garden isn't bought. It's already leaning in the shed, just waiting to bloom. Not every garden grows from earth and root. Some begin with wires, with chips, with circuits once alive with electricity, now repurposed into something entirely different. Still, silent, and unexpectedly poetic. In this backyard, technology doesn't just power the garden, it decorates it. Look closely at the fence. There, between climbing vines and wood grain, an unexpected mosaic emerges. Motherboards and switchboards, fragments of old CPUs and control panels, arranged like digital patchwork. Their green and copper surfaces shimmer gently under morning sun. Tiny resistors and capacitors catch the light like dew. It shouldn't work, but somehow it does. The rigid grit of the boards plays against the loose motion of the vines. Together, they make a space that feels both structured and wild, an ode to how chaos and control coexist in every gardener's soul. Then there's the border, subtle but mesmerizing. Old toggle switches, now weathered and rusted, are embedded in a narrow cement strip alongside a garden bed. They no longer turn anything on or off, but they mark a line, like tactile punctuation along the edge of the marigolds. Each one is angled slightly different. Each tells its own tiny tale. And just beyond, a raised wooden bed, neatly constructed, simply designed, hides a band of embedded circuit boards along its face. It's not flashy, just a quiet accent. But for those who notice, it becomes a signature, a wink, a reminder that repurposing isn't just about reuse. It's about reinvention. This is what makes gardens like this unforgettable. They're not built from kits or trends. They're built from memory, curiosity, and that beautiful impulse to keep things alive, even when they no longer work as intended. So if you got a drawer of dead remotes, a broken router, or a pile of unclaimed circuit boards, don't toss them. Instead, let them become your garden's new language. Let them tell your story in solder and rust, in green plastic and brown patina. Because sometimes the path to the most soulful garden doesn't start with a seed. It starts with a switch. In the quiet corners of handmade gardens, beauty often arrives as a whisper, not from perfection, but from repurposing, from objects once forgotten, now brought back to life with a twist of wire and a bit of wind. Here along the edge of a modest flower bed, something magical dances gently between lavender and ornamental grass. A line of bicycle gears and brake discs, each one worn with rust and time, now hangs from a wooden beam like suspended suns. They sway slightly, chiming faintly in the breeze. And below, purple blooms and golden feathergrass respond with movement of their own. It's not a sculpture you'd find in a gallery. It's better, because it lives where the butterflies live. Just steps away, another edge reveals itself, this time with silverware. Bent spoons polished by weather and light hang beside tiny bike cogs along a wire fence. Their reflective faces shimmer as bees hover nearby, drawn by the flowers, not the metal. But still, the contrast is charming. This isn't just decoration. It's a conversation between man-made and natural, between past use and present joy. What's most touching about this idea is its simplicity. You don't need to weld or grind. Just hang. Let things dangle. Let gravity and time finish the work. The worn teeth of the gears, the imperfect spoons, the dusty chains. Each piece holds its own story, and when suspended together, they hum a quiet rhythm into the space. And when you walk along the garden in the early morning light, coffee in hand, and hear the soft click or creak of metal on metal, you're reminded this is what makes a garden feel like home. Not just what's growing, but what you chose to keep, what you chose to give a second chance. So, gather your scrap bin. Look for spoons no longer matched, for gears whose bikes are long gone, for rotors and rings and tools that no longer turn. Hang them with love, space them with intention, and you'll find that sometimes the most beautiful edges are the ones that move. In a quiet backyard framed by aged timber fencing, an old metal ladder has found a second life, not as a tool of ascent, but as a tiered tower of flavor. Each step holds a terracotta pot brimming with herbs, thyme, chives, oregano, gathering morning light like old friends at kitchen window. The metal frame leans steadily, a silver skeleton against the wood, its new role both functional and charming. A bird feeder swings gently above, where small wings pause to inspect the herbs below. There's no hurry here, only the gentle rhythm of tending and waiting, of repurposing what once reached ceilings into something that now nurtures roots. Step aside a moment, and you'll find another kind of staircase, blue-painted, chipped from years of footsteps and weather. No longer useful for climbing, it now holds a cascade of soil and color. Pansies peek out from each wooden riser, faces bright with purple, yellow, and deep plum. Dwarf zinnias dance beside them, their petals catching the soft afternoon sun. Nearby, a watering can leans against the fence, and a pair of gloves rest on top like a gardener paused mid-task, lost in thought. There's magic in this simplicity, the kind that whispers. You don't need new to make beauty, just care, patience, and a little dirt under your fingernails. Then, at the edge of a gravel path, another ladder lies on its back, this one stripped of its purpose and lovingly repurposed. Its wooden rungs now frame rows of baby lettuce, tidy radish bulbs, and bright marigolds. The vegetables stretch toward the sky while the marigolds stand guard, their color a soft defense against pests. It's humble and functional, but no less poetic. A structure meant to rise has instead settled into the earth, offering life from each horizontal space. And that's the wonder of garden reuse. It doesn't require a blueprint. only an openness to reimagine. An old ladder becomes a garden, a broken step, a flower shelf, a forgotten frame, a raised bed of flavor. When you give your tools a second chance, you plant something more than just vegetables. You root stories in soil and let them bloom quietly across the seasons. Let your garden be less about perfection and more about presence, less about trend and more about tenderness. Even an old stair can grow flowers if given a little time and someone to believe in it. In the quiet corners of a garden, peace doesn't always come from silence. Sometimes it hums from the bones of forgotten metal. Here, against a simple wooden fence, old pipes hang like wind-borne pendulums. Once scaffolding or spare plumbing, now reborn with purpose. Suspended from rusty door hinges, they tap gently in the wind. Not quite chimes, not quite art, but something comfortably in between. Their sound is accidental, subtle, and strangely calming, a voice that belongs only here. Beneath their cool forms, wild mint flourishes. Daisies push up at their feet, like loyal companions keeping time with every breeze. These aren't decorations you buy. They're the kind you stumble into while cleaning the garage and realize this could be something. Further down the path, another idea reveals itself. Upright pipes with hand-drilled holes, each one now a cradle for stems and vines. What once held weight now holds bloom. The flowers spill gently from their perforated sides, cascading over the fence like laughter in slow motion. There's no strict symmetry here. The pipes are different lengths, slightly imperfect in their mounting, and that's exactly why it works. The contrast of steel and petal, of bolt and bud, feels intentional, like a duet between past labor and present grace. A third panel stands at the back gate, tall and firm, lined with metal tubes in a rhythmic row. They're functional at a glance, but step closer and you'll see it's more than that. At the base, tiny succulents creep upward. Beside them, a wire trellis hosts new shoots with nowhere else to climb. It's a border, yes, but also a story of what can happen when we stop throwing things away and start listening to what they might become. A gate made stronger, a fence made softer, a pipe made to sing. You don't need welding tools or blueprints for this. Just patience, curiosity, a bit of wire and a willing wall. And when you hear the soft clang of metal on metal as the wind passes through, you'll know this garden isn't just growing outward, it's remembering. On a quiet concrete patio where time moves gently, a forgotten relic stands reborn, not as a machine for data, but as a cradle for life. The old CPU tower, once a humming heart of blinking lights and buzzing fans, now breathes a quieter rhythm. Its side panels, long removed, reveal not wires but winding stems. Basil and cherry tomatoes stretch through the steel, reaching for light, their roots tangled in soil where circuits used to sleep. The contrast is unexpected. USB ports and cooling grates beside tender leaves, but it sings of reinvention, of tech-turned tenderness. This is more than decoration. It's an invitation, a celebration of letting go without throwing away, a way to honor the past while nurturing something entirely new. Even rusted black towers, perched on balconies with bricks behind and mugs beside, now wear garlands of creeping greenery. From their once sterile dry bays, vines tumble downward, catching soft evening sun. Their shadows flicker across nearby walls, a kind of poetry only time can write. And on gravel paths or mossy steps, another silver case lies quietly, breathing marigolds and parsley through perforated vents. The air no longer whirs with processors, but with scent, with warmth, with the kind of life that doesn't require a reboot. There's a gentle lesson here. That obsolescence doesn't have to mean the end. It can mean the start of something slower, softer, more rooted. And maybe, just maybe, this is how the digital world says goodbye. Not with silence, but with bloom. In the quiet hush of a backyard where grass grows freely and leaves are never hurried to be swept, there's a line drawn not by bricks or wood, but by memory, welded in steel and softened by rust. Old bicycle frames, once built for speed and morning wind, now rest gently in the soil, repurposed not as relics, but as poetry in form. Each curve and angle holds a history. Childhood races, errands through alleyways, the long rides home. Now they stand in the earth, half buried, a gallery of looping silhouettes that bend and frame the garden's edge like a sculpture that listens to the seasons. Between the hollow spaces, flowers bloom, violas, zinnias, calendulas, reaching through spokes and frames, dancing through time with no urgency at all. The contrast is beautiful. The rigidity of metal softened by petals. Nature making peace with what we once called junk. And perhaps that's a lesson buried just beneath the roots. That a frame missing wheels can still support growth. That a rusted handlebar can still invite the light. That beauty doesn't always come from symmetry or shine. Sometimes it comes from a bike forgotten behind a shed, now turned into a garden's quiet boundary. It's a surprisingly simple project. No cutting or welding required. Just arrangement, intention, and a patch of dirt willing to hold stories. Let the grass grow wild inside the circle. Let the flowers climb and spill through. Let the colors be what they are, real, imperfect, joyful. And if you stand there in the afternoon sun, with the scent of warm marigolds in the air and your hands still dusted from planting, you'll hear it. The sound of an old garden laughing. Not because it's fancy, but because it's alive. And in that moment, the rust will look like gold. As dusk gently folds itself over the garden, shadows stretch longer and the air begins to still. That's when the bottles come alive, each one a tiny flame dancing in a rhythm only the evening understands. Once discarded glass vessels, wine bottles, motor oil jugs, tonic jars have found a second life, not as clutter, but as quiet guardians of twilight. Lying along the garden fence, they burn with citronella or lamp oil, wrapped in rustic wire and glowing like tiny lanterns that whisper stories from another era. No two are the same. One green, one amber, one clear as memory. The imperfections in the glass shimmer with each flicker of light, like the moment itself is breathing. There's something ancient in the way flame touches glass. It's not just about repurposing or about saving space in a landfill. It's about reclaiming beauty, turning waste into warmth. These torches aren't showy. They don't compete with fairy lights or LED strips. Instead, they hum quietly in the background, holding space for quiet conversation, a cup of tea, or simply your own thoughts. By the gravel path, a shepherd's hook holds a single amber bottle. Below it, rosemary spills over the edge of a planter, its scent rising warmly with the heat. And in another corner, metal brackets curl like vines, cradling wall-mounted bottles that flicker across stucco, sending light dancing across ivy and hanging ferns. They cast no sharp spotlight, only soft orange halos, the kind that makes everything, leaves, skin, wood, look like it belongs exactly where it is. This idea doesn't require much. A drill for the wick cap, a bit of wire, maybe a hook or bracket. What it asks most for is intention, the choice to light your space not just for brightness, but for soul. And when you stand back at the edge of your yard and take it all in, the row of glowing bottles guarding the fence, the soft flames bobbing like fireflies, you'll feel something rare. Not just that your garden is beautiful, but that it is alive. In the scattered corners of forgotten drawers and tangled desk spaces, USB cables once meant for connection now find a new rhythm, not of data, but of design. Out here in the garden, beneath the honest light of morning, they become something else entirely, a woven song of color and memory. You follow the edge of a raised herb bed, and suddenly, a fence, not of wood or wire, but of red, green, black, and yellow cords, their tips still holding on to the shape of utility. Some are tightly coiled around metal rods, others threaded through soft pine boards like embroidery across the spine of a garden. They twist and pull gently, stretched between two wooden posts like a tapestry made by someone who once loved gadgets, now devoted to mint and marigold. This is not trash. This is intention turned inside out. It doesn't take much to recreate it. Just the cords you no longer need, the kind with worn tips and faded logos, collected over years. You don't untangle them. You repurpose the tangle. Let it wrap around whatever stands sturdy. A pipe, a stick, an old garden post. Then start threading, side to side, in and out. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for character. And suddenly, that small herb patch of basil and parsley is a perimeter, one stitched with old tech and new growth. The soil still smells of yesterday's watering, and the wires hum gently in your mind, like relics from another life repurposed for this one. Farther down, a wooden fence stands like a gallery wall. Someone has drilled clean little holes and threaded USB cords through in a rainbow, black, white, yellow, red, blue. They hang loosely, each one casting a different arc of shadow across time and alyssum in bloom. It's whimsical, it's strange, it's unexpectedly beautiful. Because who says a fence must be serious? The garden accepts everything. Old cables, odd ideas, forgotten technology, as long as it brings light, protection, or just a bit of joy. And here in this tiny plot between sidewalk pavers and patio edge, where once wanted things find a second wind, the only thing that matters is a life that grows on both sides of the fence. You don't need perfection. You only need to start weaving. At the edge is a humble patio, where bricks meet mulch and footsteps turn quiet. Something unexpected grows. Not just plants, but ideas. Here, repurposed metal drums, once storage vessels, now sanctuaries of soil, are lined up like a chorus of hope. Some are halved long ways, others upright, but all share the same honest rhythm. Rust at the edges, paint faded by sun, and the unmistakable glow of green life pushing upward. It's not a polished look. That's not the point. In one barrel, sweet basil spreads out like a summer fan, its scent catching the wind. Nearby, radishes peek out from dark soil like little rubies. Peppers dangle heavy on sturdy stalks, while spinach leaves crinkle and curl like pages waiting to be read. Each drum tells its own growing story, and together, they sketch a border that separates nothing, but instead connects everything. There's something grounding about vegetables in steel. The contrast between cool industrial form and tender leaf, between yesterday's utility and today's nourishment. The drums don't pretend to be elegant. They're resilient, honest. And isn't that what gardening is really about? If you're looking to try this yourself, it doesn't take more than a drum, a drill, and the will to see potential where others see scrap. Cut carefully, add drain holes at the base, and line them up where sun and water meet. Paint them if you wish, or let time and rain finish the art for you. Wooden planks placed in between serve as makeshift steps, not just for practicality, but for pacing, for slowing down, for noticing. Because when you walk past them each morning, coffee in hand, the sunlight just beginning to warm the metal, you'll see more than plants. You'll see intention, and that quiet joy that only comes from creating with your own hands, on your own terms. This border doesn't just hold vegetables, it holds peace, and a place to begin again every day. In the quiet stretch of garden's edge, where the wooden fence meets the morning sun, something unexpected begins to sing. Not with sound, but with shape, texture, and the slow growth of life. There, in place of standard planks or a lattice, hang old metal pipes, each one reclaimed, each one given a new reason to exist. Some dangle like wind chimes, suspended on rusted hinges, their hollow bodies catching the light and casting slender shadows on the grass below. Others are bolted upright like sculptural columns, filled with earth and green, punctuated by holes that offer anchorage for trailing herbs and tiny blooms. It's part industrial, part botanical, a strange duet between steel and chlorophyll. What makes this idea sing isn't just its look, but its story. Each pipe once carried something unseen, maybe water, maybe wiring, maybe the vibration of tools in a workshop long since emptied. Now, those same pipes carry marigold stems, mint runners, and vines that respond to the changing air. The transformation isn't loud or flashy. It's the kind of magic that rewards those who take time to look closely. A small bee lands on the rim of a pipe. A breeze stirs a rusted hinge, and the garden answers in motion. And if you're wondering, could you do this? Yes, and easily so. Find discarded plumbing pipes, bike frames, or even fence post offcuts. Drill holes with a simple bit. Thread a hook through an old hinge or door bracket, and hang them like bells waiting to ring. Fill with soil. Tuck in herbs, succulents, or anything that will spill and sway. Nature doesn't mind what container you give it. It only asks for a chance. What's remarkable here is how the garden teaches us, again and again, that beauty is not about perfection. It's about participation, about giving forgotten materials the dignity of second chances, and giving yourself permission to experiment without rules. In the golden hour, as the sun begins to dip and the pipes glint in the low light, this fence does what few fences ever do. It invites you to pause, to touch the cool metal, to smile at the green that found a home where rust once ruled. And maybe, just maybe, to dream up what else might still be possible, waiting quietly in the corners of your own garage. There's something oddly comforting about seeing a once loud object fall silent and find peace among flowers. Old speaker shelves, retired from their roaring youth, now sit quietly in the garden, and yet they still hold presence, perhaps even more so now. The wooden cabinets, faded by time and softened by weather, become gentle containers for life. In one corner of a patio, a speaker box leans slightly in the sunlight, It's mesh torn, wires dangling like untuned strings. But instead of noise, it now gives root to lavender, a plant that hums quietly with scent, not sound. Look closer at the cones once made for base. They're now hollows for thyme, succulents, and soft moss. Some still have light bulbs tucked beside them, burnout and cold, but oddly poetic. It's as if the garden has reclaimed this technology and made it gentle again. Elsewhere, a speaker shell becomes a bee haven. Its form now filled with bamboo sticks and straw. Each hole is shelter for pollinators. Tucked beneath a shady tree, wildflowers blooming at its base, it seems to breathe with the land. The bees don't mind that it once played music for parties. They only care that it now offers them rest. And perhaps that's a lesson. In the silence of these old sound boxes, something softer has emerged. Not silence, exactly, but a quieter kind of music. Tips if you want to make one yourself. Don't aim for perfection. Leave the broken speaker foam as it is. Let the rust show. Use drought-tolerant plants like succulents for small cavities. For deeper spaces, fill them with potting mix and herbs. You don't even need to remove all the wiring. Just tuck aside or let it trail naturally like vines. If you're making a bee home, be sure to use untreated wood and avoid disturbing the natural materials inside. Remember, this isn't about hiding the speaker's past. It's about honoring it. Let your old tech whisper again, this time in the language of leaves. There's something quietly poetic about watching life grow from a machine that once only pushed paper. What was once a forgotten relic in the corner of an old office now breathes with green energy. A printer, yes, but no longer a tool of ink and deadlines. Now a stage for sage, mounted carefully on a wooden fence under a stretch of ivy. The printer's trays glide open not to feed blank pages, but to cradle clusters of thyme, oregano, and young lettuce. The scent of crushed leaves lingers near the gravel path where terracotta pots sit like old souls. The power cord, still attached, sways gently in the breeze, a quiet symbol of transformation of what once was. This setup isn't just a statement of sustainability. It's an invitation to look again, to see beyond function and imagine possibility. With a few screws and shallow trays, an obsolete device becomes a vertical herb wall that's not only practical for tight spaces, but also beautifully unexpected. Herbs thrive here with just a bit of sun, daily watering, and the occasional pruning. Far less maintenance than printing an office report. In another corner, a different machine tells a similar story. A bulky inkjet printer sits proudly in the garden patio, its scanner lid open to reveal a tray of sweet basil stretching skyward. Nestled between two living ivy walls and flanked by a DIY bench and slatted table, it hums silently, not with motors, but with the still energy of chlorophyll and sun. This arrangement doesn't ask for much, just a container that fits the top bed, some rich soil, and a bit of basil love. There's a charm in its absurdity, and somehow it works. The most clever of the trio lies inside, a sleek, wall-mounted laser printer carcass, repurposed with steel trays that look like they were born for this purpose. Each shelf cradles its own chapter of growth. Strawberries down low, sage in the middle, and parsley up top. Between the bolts and leftover circuitry, nature winds its way around the machine skeleton, bridging the analog with the organic. It feels industrial, yes, but not cold. In fact, it's quietly alive. Practical tips subtly folded in. When converting electronics like printers into planners, always remove dangerous wiring or battery elements. Drill a few discrete drainage holes and consider the balance, both aesthetic and physical. especially if wall-mounted. Trays or paper drawers make excellent shallow containers for herbs, microgreens, or even strawberries. If your printer's top opens flat, you already have a built-in growing platform. This is more than just recycling. It's reinvention. It's watching parsley grow where once there were progress reports. And maybe that's what our homes need more of. Not just new things, but new eyes to see the old things differently. And who knew that old printer in the garage, it might just be your next basil bed in disguise. Out in the backyard where weeds once crept in plastic pots sat idle, something oddly poetic has bloomed. Not a rare flower, not a fancy sculpture, just herbs and a collection of old TV remotes, reborn as garden markers. At first glance, you might chuckle, a basil sprig brushes against an ancient channel changer. Spinach is handwritten across a crusty white remote that's clearly seen one too many late-night sitcoms. These aren't your typical garden tags, but they carry stories. Stories of households, of lazy afternoons flipping channels, of movie nights now composted into memories. This is the kind of whimsy that makes a garden feel like a journal. Not pristine or designed by trend, but lovingly scribbled and oddly honest. Each remote, whether sun-faded or pastel-painted, serves a small, clever purpose. They're rain-proof, sturdy, and free. Push-button labels work just fine when you're trying to remember which pot hides a thyme and which will eventually birth carrots. There's something beautiful about giving old plastic one last, grounding role to stand quietly among new growth. You can easily try this yourself. Hunt down those remotes tucked in the junk drawer. Give them a rinse. Add a label with marker, white tape, or even scratch it in with something sharp. Let them stand firm in your soil like soldiers of domestic history, now defending rows of herbs from forgetfulness. These strange little totems don't just label, they lighten the mood. They're conversation starters. They're reminders that gardening doesn't have to be expensive or curated. It just has to feel alive. In this tiny corner of the world, surrounded by thyme and marjoram, the language of buttons and sprouts finds a harmony. And somehow it works. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Turning forgotten signals into flowering silence. There's something almost poetic about giving an old satellite dish a new story, one that's not about receiving data from the sky, but about growing beauty from the earth. In the soft corner of a backyard, beneath the warm hush of morning sun, a rusted dish rises like a forgotten moon. Its metal arms once scanned the sky for distant signals. Now, they cradle the delicate spirals of sweet pea vines and morning glories. Each tendril wraps the circular frame with grace, softening its sharp industrial edge with blossoms of violet and white. The rust, rather than a flaw, becomes texture, a weathered memory of use, like fingerprints on an old book cover. This idea is more than reuse. It's an invitation to see vertical gardening with new eyes. A satellite dish, if unbolted from its mount, can be planted directly into soil or lean gently against a wall. If the mesh is intact, it becomes a net for tomatoes or beans. If it's just the circular rim left behind, it can frame vines like a living mandala. The contrast of cold iron with soft leaves and petals creates something visually magnetic. Part sculpture, part trellis, part whisper the past. In another garden, cherry tomato vines dance upward in spirals, reaching toward a dish screwed to a wooden fence. The fruit blushes red and orange against the neutral gray of the metal, like lanterns flickering in the breeze. Nearby, a watering can wait, as if cued for its next act in this quiet performance. Here, the antenna isn't hidden, it's celebrated. Left raw, wires still visible, it speaks honestly of its past while nurturing something entirely new. For those with an old antenna in storage, there's no need for precision. Let the vines lead. Morning glories will find their way through any gap. Beans and peas will climb with abandon. The circle becomes a guide, a spine for soft things to cling to, and perhaps the most surprising joy lies in its unexpectedness. Neighbors pause, smile, ask questions. A child points and says, "That used to be for TV? And now it's for bees and for shade and for watching flowers bloom in quiet circles." In the end, that's the magic of this idea, turning a symbol of passive watching into something you must tend, touch, water, and wait for. From static to blooming, from signal to silence. And in that silence, something truly begins to grow. In a quiet corner of the patio, where the pavers hold the warmth of yesterday's sun and the ferns whisper stories in the breeze, hangs a forgotten relic made useful again. What once powered the turning wheels of bicycle, greasy, worn, forgotten, now gently cradles a pile of ivy, suspended like a lantern in a garden of stillness. This is not just a hanging basket. It is a song of cycles, of movement turned to pause. The old chain, speckled with rust and memory, wraps confidently around a metal hook, bearing the weight of new life. Its form is simple, industrial, and honest, no embellishments, no polished shine, yet it carries elegance in its humility. The ivy trails with purpose, cascading over the rim like a soft green waterfall against cool silver, its leaves glossy with the joy of sunlight and moisture. Nearby, lavender sways in another cradle of chains. Bees gather in quiet worship, knowing this is their altar of scent and color. The contrast between cold steel and living green is not jarring. It is grounding. It reminds us that the garden does not judge material, only intention. Even the old links of a broken drive can become a throne for blossoms. For those watching, wondering if they too could make such magic, the answer is simple. Yes, you do not need to be a blacksmith or a botanist. Just look around. Find that chain you meant to throw out. Clean it. Oil it lightly if you wish, or let it tell its story with rust. Loop it into 3 parts and join it with a sturdy ring or bolt. Attach it to a pot, metal, clay, or even a repurposed tin, and let gravity do the rest. Hang it from a pergola beam, a ceiling hook, or a branch that bows just right. Let it hold rosemary, thyme, trailing strawberries, or the exuberance of petunias. In this small act of reuse, you invite nature to reclaim what was once movement and give it stillness. What was once noise becomes quiet beauty. These chain hangers are not just functional, they are poetry, a reminder that our hands can shape more than we think, and that something as ordinary as a discarded bike part can become a frame for life, light, and renewal. So next time you pass by that scrap pile, pause. See not waste, but potential. Let your garden speak through salvaged steel, and let every chain link cradle a little bit of bloom.